issue we've heard a lot about lately. There have been some local stories, of course, on the issue, and a lot of conversation nationwide, as well as here in the Bismarck-Mandan area. School bullying. It's something a lot of us had to deal with as kids, and now that we have children of our own, we're obviously concerned about it, but maybe we don't know exactly how to deal with it. A lot of us maybe are wondering if the lessons we learned in dealing with school bullies, or let's face it, some kids who were former bullies themselves, they may be concerned about their kids, but they're wondering if maybe the lessons they learned over the years are the right ones. And here to talk about the whole issue is a fascinating gentleman, Joe. We'll call him Joe the Biker. Good morning, Joe. Thanks for joining us here at Bis Man Weekly.
Good morning, Jim. How's things out in North Dakota?
Fantastic. Now, you're in Florida, right?
Correct.
How's the weather right now?
Warm and muggy.
Not too bad, okay? Yeah, your typical Florida weather, right?
Absolutely. I moved here last year from Massachusetts, and it's much different.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the bullying issue. First of all, Joe, I guess I should ask you a little bit about your own credentials.
Well, as you mentioned, I do things in schools known as Joe the Biker. I use this very unique persona in order to have children resonate with a unique individual who has a very important message to help them deal with bullying. But I have, over the past, written a couple of books on bullying, and I have also been on an ABC affiliate with a segment on a weekly basis called Bully Busters. And frankly, I was targeted when I was young myself. They called me Yubbie, and that was a name, and there was a lot of torment around that. So I have a really good insight onto what children experience when they're bullied.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Why do kids, well, I mean, there's so many obvious questions to ask. Why do kids become bullies?
Well, we usually can tie it back to the home in most cases. Something's happening in a home, and I even talk to the bullies when I'm at schools, offering them help, saying that there is something happening in their life that causes them to come to school and pick on other people, that they can come forward and talk to the counselors, talk to the administrators at the school to get help. Because usually there are a number of variables that create a bully. Permissive aggressiveness in the home, maybe detachment from the primary caregiver. So there are a number of variables. The children are not born bullies. And as I tell my student audiences, no one in a crib was a bully. Somebody's developed into a bully, and it's usually because something happened in their life that caused them to act that way.
So you don't buy into the whole Lord of the Flies argument that kids are born with a natural amount of this uncontrollable aggression?
There are those that could be, but those are the exception to the rule. In a far majority of cases, it's more something happening in a child's environment from the time they were born to the first day they come into school.
Let's talk a little bit about the things that go into making a bully. As you say, you mentioned, and I'm looking at your blog right now, you talk about inappropriate discipline. What is inappropriate about certain types of discipline?
Well, there's always been a lot of controversy around this. They always felt, the old saying, spare the rod and spoil the child. But research over years and years, so many different research has been done reflecting that when a child is abused, hit, or there is an inappropriate discipline, that starts to make them feel bad about themselves. That starts to actually disconnect them from their caregiver because they may believe that there's something wrong with them. And that could cause them to feel that they need to come into school and vent that anger, and they vent it towards other students.
Okay, where though do you draw the line? What is appropriate, what is inappropriate?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I come from a Polish heritage, and in my days, my dad would use a strap, and he would hit us several times. That would be considered very inappropriate. I think what is important is an appropriate discipline is a timeout. When a child is acting up, a child is misbehaving, that instead of hitting the child or demeaning a child, telling them that they're no good, that they're bad, that you take a time out, send the child to the room. I've had over 100 inner city foster children over 14 years. Obviously, I couldn't hit them as a foster parent. I would take things away. So there are a lot of positive ways of being able to have a structure in the home and use discipline rather than touching a child.
Joe, I assume you've seen The Simpsons once or twice over the years. There's a recurring character on the show named Nelson, who's a bully. He's the one
takes many different forms. And that's one form. It can be now cyberbullying, which is very popular, where things are anonymous, people posting pictures saying rude things. So there's just such a variety of different types of bullying, and some of them could be that aggressive.
Okay, let's move on here. You talk about permissive aggressiveness, which sounds like a kind of a contradiction in terms, like an oxymoron.
It is. Remember, children are like sponges. When they are born and they're in their crib, from that moment on, they're absorbing everything around them all the time, their environment. If they live in a home, and I've had this happen where I've even consulted a student at one of the schools I presented at, whose principal pulled me over afterwards to talk to this child. He called somebody a name, a very inappropriate name. When I sat down with the student, I asked him, well, how many brothers and sisters do you have? And he said, well, he has 5 brothers and sisters. I said, well, when you're at home, are you allowed to call each other names? He said, of course. Do you guys fight? Yeah, well, my mother and his father scream at each other all the time. That's permissive aggressiveness. What it is a child sees how their parents behave in the home. Their parents are a role model. So when they see that in the home, they think that's acceptable and okay. Now they come to school. If they don't get what they want, they call somebody a name. Or, as their parents may be arguing all the time, they start screaming and yelling at people. So permissive aggressiveness is when there's aggressive behavior in a home that is not acceptable, really, in a school environment.
So, in other words, they see this happening at home and they assume that that's the normal way of doing things.
Who are the role models? Their parents. So they're going to go and try to mimic their parents' behavior when they are confronted with conflict, and that's what this is all about. The parents are really the first teachers, the role model that teaches a child how to deal with conflict.
What about the influence of TV and the movies? Do you think there's anything to the notion that children learn their bullying skills, if you will, from the media?
I don't believe that. I really think they may see violence on TV, but research keeps on telling us that there is a very strong link between the household, the children that the young person hangs around with, to bullying, more so than violence they may see on TV.
Well, let me ask you, Joe, from the perspective of someone who, you know, I'm sure you have people like this who come up to you frequently and they say, well, you know, my parents, they whipped my butt when I was a kid and I turned out okay, so what's the problem?
Well, my parents whipped me when I was a kid and I didn't turn out okay. And what happens is when, that's why the discussion of around what's appropriate discipline, inappropriate discipline can be internalized and actually create a poor self-esteem and self-image. And that affects everybody forever. I'm 61 years old, and I still can recall back in those days. I had a certain lack of self-esteem and self-confidence many years. So I didn't become a bully. I was a targeted individual. But in the long term, what happens is it has an impact on people. And how much of an impact is determined by how the child reacted to it. Remember, everything we experience is actually logged into our brain. There's no erasers. There's no delete button inside of our amygdalas where all our emotional responses are. So if you are demoralized, demeaned when you're a child, that stays with you forever. There's no erasers to that. And everything that you do in life is based on your emotional reaction to things that happened in your life.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here, Joe, and we'll come back. I want to talk a little bit more about this issue, and we'll also give you a chance to plug your resources as well in just a couple of minutes. So hang on, Joe.
Thank you.
Talking with Joe the Biker, as he is known, about the school bullying issue. We will continue on this subject in just a couple of moments here. Now it's 57. Bis Man Weekly at Super Talk 1270. I'm Jim Walsh. My guest for the next 10 minutes or so, Joe the Biker, as he is known. He tours around the country talking to schools about dealing with the school bullying issue. Welcome back, Joe. Question from the other side of the coin here. From the perspective of parents whose kids may be the victims of bullying, how do you know? What are the warning signs?
Well, as a parent, parents are very concerned about trying to be able to detect if there are some signs. And a couple of those signs are, one, very obviously, if the child comes home with bruises and cuts and things of that nature and really doesn't give an adequate answer or satisfactory answer, if it happens all the time, that's quite an obvious sign. But some of the more subtle signs are oftentimes a child can withdraw, not talk and communicate. They may even have sleeping issues. They may also have problems in school, maybe take another way home. So those are a few. Your audience can get my Parent's Guide to Bullying, which is free on my website, and that'll give them a lot more signs that they should be aware of if, in fact, their child is being bullied.
So how do you deal with a bullying issue if you have a child who is being bullied? When I was a kid, the standard procedure was to try to teach the child to fight back.
And that was probably what I was taught too. In reality, what we have to look at is we need to bully-proof children. We need to bring up the dialogue of bullying before they go to school so they know what they should do if it was to happen to them. And the most important thing is that a parent really has to develop a level of communication with their child where the child feels free to come to them with anything, knowing that their parents will receive them and love them. And it's with that channel of communication that parents should take the time, sit down and have dinner together, take a couple of minutes every night before the child goes to bed and have this heart-to-heart talk about what's happening in their life. So I think the first most important thing is to have a conversation with the child, find out what's happening. Now, what we really suggest is, one, a child should keep a journal indicating what the dates were, who was involved, where it happened at school, what adults they told at school, and keep this journal, because that will give now the parents evidence, information when they go forward and they contact the school system, which most school districts nowadays, because of the bullying issue, would have a contact person or an administrator who's in charge of that. And then a parent really needs to go and present their case. And it's a very emotionally charged subject, Jim. So many parents that I consult call me up and they're agitated, they're angry, and who wouldn't be? If I was my child, I would be angry too. But parents really have to be aware of the fact when they contact schools that they need to kind of write down stuff before they contact the school and approach it in a very calm manner, trying to work together with the school as a team in order to resolve the problem.
How are the schools doing by and large in dealing with this issue?
It varies from states to state. You know, some states are very strong with their laws and their policies. In school district, it actually varies from school district to school district. I've been into some commendable places where they're right on top of it. They act immediately. You know, a lot of times even the problem comes up, what is bullying? So if I called you a name, is that really bullying? And so, you know, the schools have a lot to deal with also, trying to weed it out and investigate. And it really varies from state to state, school district to school district. Some do a great job. Other ones are somewhat lackadaisical.
So what advice would you give a parent? Let's say the parent gets a call, and it's a call that nobody wants to get, that we've had an issue with your child in school, the child is bullying or the child is being bullied. Either way, what advice do you give to the parent who now has to go in and talk to the authorities in the school system about the issue?
They need to do, one, an investigation. And I hate to say that. So many parents would say, well, my child will never tell me anything but the truth. But they really need to do an investigation from their child, try to ascertain exactly what had occurred. And then when they do go to the school, go in with the attitude that we're working together to solve this problem. Because again, it's an emotionally charged subject. They got to be very careful about going in there and yelling and screaming and getting upset at a principal. Because if there's one way to shut off a conversation, and I'm told by so many principals that I've met, as soon as a parent comes in and starts yelling and screaming at me, I know right at that point in time where the problem is, because that's aggressiveness. And where did the child learn aggressiveness if the parents are that aggressive? So they really have to be calm, relaxed, and have things in a chronological order to present.
What about the issue with girls? In the last decade or so, we've been hearing more and more about girls bullying other girls, or even in some cases, girls bullying boys. But this is not necessarily a new thing, is it? I seem to remember that kind of thing happening when I was in school.
It does happen. I think girls have a different approach. Research has told us that boys tend to be more physical. So when it comes to bullying, it's more getting into people's faces, pushing, shoving, and hurting. Girls are far more subtle. It's more about passing rumors. It could be internet, cyberbullying, where they take somebody's pictures and they pass it around with something mean around it. So I think it's been around, just like you said, Jim, even when we were kids. I think girls take a different approach to it than boys do.
What about teaching the martial arts to your kids? A lot of kids take judo and karate and boxing. Is that a good thing as far as the bullying issue, dealing with the bullying issue?
I have a black belt in a martial art called Hanpo. And frankly, I think martial arts is a very healthy thing for any child to be exposed to, but not really to combat bullying. What martial arts gave me was a confidence in my ability to take care of myself if I needed to. And because I had that confidence, it was easier for me to walk away from aggressive behavior because I really knew at the end of the day I was going to be okay. So I think any type of activity that creates positive confidence, healthy self-confidence, self-esteem is really good for a child because that gives that child an ability to feel okay about themselves. When they feel okay about themselves, it's easier for them to walk away.
I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because from my own personal experience, when I was a boy in school, I was teased a lot. I had big ears, and I was teased about it, called names like Dumbo and elephant ears and so on. My parents actually expended the money and had my ears repaired by plastic surgery. But
wow.
Surprise, the kids just seem to find something else to latch onto. They always seem to find some reason, and I wonder if it's because some kids are just, by the way they carry themselves, by their whole mannerisms, they're just more prone to being bullied than others.
I think you're right on the money. Jim, I think you're right on the money. What happens is there are young kids out there, and just like you said, the way they carry themselves, maybe they're very smart, could be a variety of reasons that are ones who would be targeted by bullies because they're looking for a reaction. So the fact that you had something with your ears and then you even had it repaired, well, they already knew how you were going to react because based on your prior behavior. So the key is that we try to help children learn is to walk proud. If somebody says something to you, walk away, maybe laugh it off. Don't react to it because that's what the bully's looking for. They're looking for that reaction. If you don't react to it, they're going to go look for somebody else.
What is the connection between bullying and the extreme stories? And I don't want to make too much of this necessarily because obviously it's statistically a very unlikely thing. A child is going to react like a Columbine High School or what happened more recently in Colorado. But is there a connection between being bullied and this type of ultraviolent behavior?
Absolutely. And what it is, as we discussed before, we talked about permissive aggressiveness. Things that happen to us as children and what happened to me as a child eventually define me as an individual. And if you internalize early childhood trauma and anger, eventually you still have it and it builds up and it starts defining you as an adult. And then you start taking aggressive behavior. So kids that are sometimes targeted become bullies themselves as an adult. Or if they are a bully as a child, they continue to be a bully as an adult. So it never surprises me. I hate to even admit it, but as a child, I tried to take my life 3 times. Because I could not deal with the loneliness and the pain that I was experiencing. And so we're talking of trauma here. And people that are traumatized from rape, from bullying, whatever the issue may be when they're children, they carry that. And that sometimes they carry a lot of anger with them. And then they vent it at some future point in time towards innocent people just because they're trying to get rid of that pain inside.
Okay, Joe, I'm sorry to say we're running up on time here, but I did want to give you at least a half a minute or a minute to go ahead and plug your resources. You have some are free, some aren't, but go ahead and tell us how we can find out more.
Yeah, if they go to my site, www.joethebiker.com, I have a Parents Guide to Bullying that is absolutely free. Anybody can receive it. There's a lot of good information, a lot of good resources in that. I also have a book called Say No to Bullying Today, which is a workbook for children and parents to work together with, to bully-proof their child so they know what to do when they go to school. I also have a school read that's called Call Me Yubbie, and this is for 7th and 8th graders. It builds empathy towards the child that's being targeted. That's all great information. As you know yourself, Jim, you went to my site. I have video blogs continuously giving parents positive information on ways to help nurture their children and protect them. Because at the end of the day, we as parents want to do one thing. We want our children to be safe and protected at school.
One final question for you, Joe. If you're Joe the Biker, what type of bike are you riding these days?
Well, I have several bikes, but I have a Royal Star 4-cylinder that I use for marketing purposes, and it's a 1300. I have a 1800 VTX, so I kind of use those type of bikes in my work.
Joe the Biker, thanks again, buddy. We'll put you in the Rolodex, and we'll keep you in mind for the future.
Thank you so much, Jim, and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day, sir. It's Super Talk 1270, name of the show, Bis Man Weekly. We'll continue in just a moment.